Hey everyone, my name is Gregory Evans, and this is the Craigslist, the Forgotten Gold Mine. A little while back, I was working on Craigslist, and I've been on Craigslist for quite some time, and I've done pretty well on Craigslist. You know, one of the things that's interesting about Craigslist is that it's a channel that most people don't think about. You know, when people think about doing business um, with channels, they think about Facebook, they think about LinkedIn, they think about TikTok. You know, there's lots of different channels out there. But one of the things they don't think about very often is Craigslist. And one of the great things about that is that because they don't think about Craigslist, there's huge opportunity there. So it is one of those areas that is not as competitive as some of the other channels that you work on. Now, I've been working on Craigslist for quite some time. I typically can earn anywhere from 500, 1,000 or more using Craigslist, and I'm going to get into that as we go through this series. But what's important to know is that this is not difficult. It does take a little bit of work, but it's not difficult. It doesn't take a lot of time to do this. Okay, so let's get into this. My name is Gregory Evans, and I'm a business growth advisor, business broker, consultant, and trainer. I specialize in business brokerage and franchise brokerage, a lot of franchise brokerage, both sales and resales, mergers and acquisitions. I've been doing that for over 30 years. Prior to that, over my span of my career, I've been a financial planner, trust officer. I worked for most of the major firms, financial services firms out there. Right now, I'm working as a business broker for the largest business brokerage firm in the country. And I can tell you that experience as a business broker is unlike anything most people would recognize. The downside of being a business broker is that in terms of getting paid, it's anywhere from zero to never. You never know when a business is going to sell. So I got involved in doing a lot of consulting as a way to pay bills and things of that nature in between doing transactions. And so Craigslist is one of those areas that I started working on many, many years ago, and has been very successful at it. So I wanted to kind of share for those of you out there that want to make some extra money. I wanted to share with you a very simple way to make money doing it. Now, let's talk about my why, and maybe yours will be similar. First thing to remember is you don't want to make this deep because it's not. Don't think of this, or at least I don't think of this as business consulting or some marketing scheme or business financing. Yes, as we go through this series, we will be doing all of those things. But above all, I really want you to realize that it's just another way to make some extra money. That's it. That's how I see it. I don't see it as this major thing. And so, really, what if you could make an extra $1,000 to $3,000 a month? You know, what could you do with that? Well, I look at it as a way just to pay bills. If I want to go to a concert, I'm down here in the South. I'm about an hour away from 18 casinos in Biloxi. So, it's a getaway weekend, for me and my significant other, maybe the same for you. If I need to fix stuff around the house, your car goes down and you need to get it fixed, those types of things. And you can make money pretty quickly doing this. And so that's the most important way to look at this. All right. It's just a way to do it. It's not the way because there's lots of ways to do it. This is just a way. So why Craigslist? Well, as I mentioned, most people don't pay attention to Craigslist, and it truly is the forgotten channel. One of the beautiful things I like about Craigslist is there's just not a lot of competition. When I say there's not a lot of competition, I mean there's not a lot of competition amongst people who are working with businesses on Craigslist. They're somewhere else. They're doing, and I have all of those things. I have lead sources. I have used all different types of lead sources, but I found that Craigslist is very effective because you have easy access to the business owner. You have easy access to his telephone number, his email. You can find out whether he has a website, and many times they don't have a website, or if they do have a website, the website doesn't look that great. And we'll get into those things. But overall, versus other types of channels, there's very low competition in Craigslist. Now, this is very, very important, very important. Before you get started doing this, it is very important that you put together a profile, of exactly who you are and what you do, what your area of specialty is. So when a person thinks of you, what do they think of? When they think of Gregory Evans, they know that Gregory is a business broker. He's a business advisor. He does franchises. All right. And so that's important for you. If you're in the insurance business and that's your specialty, or you're in the retirement planning business and that's your specialty, or if you're in the real estate business and that's your specialty, then that's what you're known for. So you want to create either a LinkedIn profile. I use LinkedIn, or maybe a Facebook page. I have both, but primarily I use LinkedIn. And the reason I use LinkedIn is because really I don't use business cards. I have business cards, but I don't use business cards. I don't give them out. As far as I'm concerned, people use business cards, to pick their teeth with, and they'll put them on their desk and it'll get thrown away. But when you're looking at a digital footprint, or LinkedIn, you want to make sure you put it on your signature on your email. So whenever you get an email from me, and many of you have, you'll see that my LinkedIn profile is there. The reason that's important is because when you're working with business owners, they're going to go, if you have it there, they want to know who the heck you are. And so you want to make sure that you have a LinkedIn profile. So when they click, they can see your picture. You want to make sure that you put a picture there. If you don't put a picture there, then people don't trust you. What are you hiding? Right? That's how people think. But if they see your picture and you become human, so people can say, okay, well, I know who that is. They know what you look like, and those types of things. And then they'll scroll down into your profile, and then they can learn more about you, and they can learn more about what you do. But the most important thing, you make sure, and this is in everything you do, and we'll get into that when you're dealing with business owners too, because you'll find a lot of business owners on LinkedIn, they don't even have clickable links. So that's very, very important that before you get started, that you put a presence out there so people know exactly who you are and what you do. Okay, very, very important. Okay, so let's go to a LinkedIn or a Facebook page so you can see exactly how that would work. Okay, here's my LinkedIn page. A few years ago, I put the background there that you see called Accelerate Your Cash Flow Strategy. I've done some training. I'm a business growth advisor, so I did a big training on accelerating your cash flow. As you can see there, it says drive growth, increase sales, and improve cash flow. So when a person pulls up my LinkedIn page, there's my picture, there's a little bit about myself, and then they notice that it says accelerate your cash flow. And so now they know from that moniker that, well, Greg helps companies accelerate their cash flow. Very important to a business owner. All right. So as you go down through my LinkedIn, and there's two ways you can put together a LinkedIn profile. And one of the things I would suggest you do, if you have not either A, put together a LinkedIn profile, or B, you need to put together a better LinkedIn profile. What I would do is go to YouTube and put in LinkedIn profile 2022. And that way you can listen and read a little bit about how, people have put together LinkedIn profiles and learn something about it, because you can have a LinkedIn profile that looks like a resume, or you can have a LinkedIn profile that looks like a profile, and either one will work. Either one will do. So if we go down through my LinkedIn, one of the things I do, I post a lot on LinkedIn, articles and things of that nature. So as I go through here, you'll see my experience, so business growth and venture funding advisor, vice president with Sunbelt Business Brokers, managing member. I used to run a real estate firm doing lease options. I worked for Vested, as a regional sales director, for a tax law firm. And then as you open this up, they can see all of your other experience. because people are going to do this. They want to know, what kind of experience does this guy have? Is he really qualified, to talk to me about whatever he's talking about? And so that's very important. So you can see all of my experience here, those types of things. All right. Then, you'll have if you have some recommendations, from clients or friends or associates, you can put that there as well. But again, very important that you have a presence. All right. So that because this really is my business card, and you want to think of it that way because that's really what it is. All right. It is a client's or a prospect's first introduction to who you are. So this is very, very important. Okay, now let's look at, some of the focus markets, because there's some focus markets, that I deal with on Craigslist. And so let's kind of look at that. The industries that I primarily focus on are home services, legal services, automotive. Marine is not one I really work with, but you'll see that when I go through the LinkedIn profile. I mostly do deal with home services. That's a big market for me because I do a lot of customer financing. We'll get into that as well. Legal services is another big one. I don't have funeral homes here. I deal with a lot of funeral homes, but you really won't see funeral homes, really on Craigslist. So I'm focusing on the ones that you will see on Craigslist. And home services is huge. At one time, and I don't know what the percentage is these days, but at one time, it was said that Craigslist is about 80% or more of real estate. So obviously, if that's the case, and it still is, because a lot of people post their homes on Craigslist, selling their homes, that type of thing on Craigslist. So home services would be a big market. You're trying to sell your home, you're trying to buy a home. And I did a lot of that when I was doing these options. But home services, obviously deals with the home market. All right, plumbers, electricians, roofers, you name it. They're all there on Craigslist. Tile, flooring, you name it. They're all there. Okay, legal services is also another big market on Craigslist. And we'll get into those and I'll show you how some of those work. Automotive. When I first started doing this, I wasn't on Craigslist doing automotive. What I was doing is I was out actually driving years ago, many, many years ago. I was out driving and I was doing auto repair shops. I started doing auto repair shops. And then I went from doing auto repair shops to, just general auto repair. And then I moved to collision, right? And because I do a lot of customer financing, I was actually financing the deductibles. So, for example, if you have $1,000 deductible because you're trying to keep your premiums low, you have an accident, then of course, obviously you got to come with the first $1,000 or whatever that deductible is. And most people, particularly if you're trying to keep your premiums low, you need to have a higher deductible. The problem with that is, since you got to come up with the first $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever your deductible is, how are you going to come up with that? Because you can't get your car fixed until you do that. So when I started doing collision shops, I started financing the deductible. So I'd go around to collision shops and I would talk to them about that. So I ran into one particular collision shop and, I'm telling them the spiel about financing the deductible. And we talked about marketing, because one of the things that I also did when I talked about customer financing is the marketing side of customer financing. So as an example, I had a client, when I went and talked to him about the financing deductibles, he actually put a huge sign, and he was this was in Atlanta, and it was on a corner of a major intersection, and he had his shop right there. So he put a huge sign, a yellow sign with red writing, and said, "We finance deductibles." And I cannot tell you how much business this guy did. So that was a big part. Later on in Atlanta, my car broke down. I would go on Buford Highway. Some of you know what Buford Highway is in Atlanta. It stretches nearly from downtown all the way out to Gwinnett County. And so I would just get in my car and I would, drive a block and get out of my car, because all these auto shops were all tightly in those areas. So I'd get out of my car and I'd hit auto shops on one side of the street, and I'd hit auto shops on the other side of the street. And then I'd get back in my car and I'd drive another couple of blocks, get out of my car. You know, that's what I did. I remember doing, when I first started doing it, it was the summertime. It was very, very hot. And the back of my shirt was sweating, because I didn't want the air conditioning running, because I had to start my car, starting my car, so I was trying to keep down the wear and tear on it. But eventually, and I did that for quite some time, but eventually I had a problem with my car. My car broke down. Specifically, my transmission went out. And at that time, I was terrified. I mean, I was, because what I was doing, I would go talk to a business owner. And when he got started, I would do not only the customer financing, but I would do the marketing. And so to do the custom financing, because in those days, it was a lot different than it is now with custom financing. And so the way I really made money was not on the customer financing. I was making money on doing the marketing. So I would charge the client $199, to do some marketing for him. And so basically what would happen, I'd do marketing so that people would know that he offered customer financing. And I did very well with that. But also what was interesting is they would write me a check. This is going back a long time ago. They would write me a check for $199, and I'd maybe do 3, 4, 5, 6 of those a day. But in between, I would actually go to their bank, and I would, find out where their bank was, whether it was a credit union or a bank. I'd actually go to the bank, find out where the bank is. Sometimes it was small banks, so it was kind of tough finding the bank. But most of them had large bank accounts. They were with large banks, and so I would go to the bank, show my ID, cash the money, and then and I did that for a long time. That's how I made a living. Tough way to make a living, right? But still, I learned a lot. I was making anywhere from 500 to 1,000, sometimes $1,500, just running around doing this, doing customer financing, which I really wasn't getting paid because of the type of finance. We would get paid, but we weren't getting paid the way we get paid on customer financing today. We would get paid it was a delayed payment. And so in order to make money, I would also do the marketing. So I learned how to do some marketing. I had to justify a way to make a living. So I did a special marketing program for them, and they would pay me to do that. But that was a great, great industry, a real great process that I did. So that was many, many years ago. So it's a little bit different today. But just to give you an idea, with home services, these are the areas on Craigslist that are most predominant. Home services and legal services are the ones that I utilize the most on Craigslist. All right. So now let's get into that. Okay, let's look at some of the services that I offer. You may do services a little bit different than I, but I just wanted to give you some ideas of the types of services that make sense for me on Craigslist. Customer financing is the biggest, service that I provide to clients on Craigslist. But obviously, business financing, we'll get into that in a later segment. Very big. Credit restoration. Credit restoration, some people really, really like credit restoration. It's not that big of a deal to me. The main reason that I do credit restoration is because I do business financing. And because I'm doing business financing, when we get into the business financing segment, a lot of times clients get turned down for business financing. And so credit restoration makes sense because they may not be able to get financing today, but we can do some credit restoration work for them. And then we can go back in and get business financing. And I'll get, more into that a little deeper when we get into business financing segment, because one of the business financing firms that I work with, we have a landing page. And when the client fills out that landing page, we'll have their name, first name, last name. We'll have their email. They'll give a drop down of about where their credit score is. Then we will contact them, and either they get approved or they don't get approved. But what's beautiful about that is when I go into the back office, I can see all the information that he filled out on a landing page. The reason that's important is because I'll take that email and I'll put that in my order responder. We'll get into that in a separate segment also. And so I can begin building my list from the fact that they either got approved or not approved. So if you look at that, customer financing, I get paid when we set up customer financing for the client. Now remember, when we're doing customer financing, the business owner is our client, not the consumer. The consumer is his client, but the business owner is your client. Okay. When we do business financing, I'm able to get all of that information. We can do the credit restoration. Another thing you'll find very interesting is on Craigslist, you're going to have, some businesses are onesies or twosies, but in addition to that, you'll have some larger businesses on Craigslist. But as it relates to business entity, a lot of these businesses may be sole proprietors. And so, you may want to talk about business entity formation services. That's another big area. Digital marketing. You're going to find on Craigslist that a lot of these businesses are very unsophisticated because they're onesies and twosies, and they're just not that sophisticated. So digital marketing, we'll get into that in another segment. Digital marketing is a very, very big market when you're dealing on Craigslist. Website creation / replacement. When we get into Craigslist, you're going to see, I was doing a one-on-one session for one of the folks in my business group, and we were looking at legal services as an example. And when we're looking at legal services, you'll see that when we get to that part. They had a one-page website. And when we both saw it, I said, wow, that is horrible. Now, what's important about that, because, website creation is not something I necessarily like either. Credit restoration, website, creation, not a big deal if you think about it, but it really is. Here's why. When you're on Craigslist, you're going to see a lot of businesses that they don't even have a website there. So, if you'll find out whether they have one. A lot of them don't. All right. And when they do have a website, you'll see that it doesn't look great because they haven't spent a lot of time, on that, or just had someone do one real quick. So we were looking at this legal website, and it was a one-page website. And let me tell you, the thing was just terrible. It really was. It was terrible. And so the biggest market, or one of the biggest markets in websites today, is not necessarily creation. That's a big market, particularly on Craigslist, but replacement. And so, a while back, what I did is I had a buddy of mine put together a several websites, particularly when I was doing auto. So I had him do 2 or 3 different types of websites for auto. And so when I'm talking to a business owner or I'm emailing some information, I may say, hey, I was looking, I don't know if you have a website. They may respond and say, no, I really don't have a website. And we'll get into that deeper on how you approach that. And then I will say, well, let me give an example of the work that we do on websites for, say, auto. They would look at it and say, wow, that's nice. And then the magic starts right there. What do I have to do to have a website like that? And of course, how much would that cost be? So right there on the spot, you're making $300 to $500. And so I would have my buddy create the site, and you can do the same. We'll get to that part. You can do the same thing. And so I would tell the client, I said, listen, we can put that website together for you for, say, I don't know, say $300, $500. So we did it for $500. I said, we need $250 to get started, and then $250 on delivery. So right there, you're sending the guy an invoice. He's sending you $250. So just on that day, same day, you made $250. It'll take, and you, particularly if you use some of the websites that I mentioned, or if you go to Fiverr and have someone, there's various ways you can do that. And it takes just a couple of days, depending on, how you approach it. And so now you created $250. I may pay the person who put the website together, or if you did your own, you can do your own way. And there's lots of different website creation services. We'll get to that when we get to that part. So if I had my buddy do a website for $150 and I picked up 250, I'd give him $150, and then on delivery, I'd make the balance of the money. Or if you wanted to charge more. So there's lots of ways you can do that, okay? The next segment is list building for the client and for yourself. This is a biggie. I've talked about autoresponders, in autumn. I've talked about this, many, many times. Very few people, even after I've talked about it hundreds of times, very few people either A, have an autoresponder, and if they have one, they're not using it. They just never catch on to it. I get it, because for many years, I did not have an autoresponder. Or when I did have an autoresponder, I didn't know how to use it. And so I'd pay every month for an autoresponder that I never used. I started out using Aweber, and then I moved over to MailChimp. Now, finally, I'm using GetResponse, and I've had GetResponse now, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, maybe more. I forget. It's been a long time. But when you talk about the list building segment, and when I get into that, because there's going to be just an area I just talk about autoresponders and building lists. With GetResponse, you have an affiliate program, all right? And we'll talk about affiliates because that's a very big, affiliate marketing is a very big part of this whole thing. So when you're talking about an affiliate program with GetResponse as an example, you can get paid when the client is paying his bill every month. So you'll remember what I was saying, you have a landing page for the business financing, and I'll be able to create the guys, I'll be able to get a profile, I'll be able to see his email, and I'll put that email in his name, because you have to have a name and an email before it goes in the autoresponder. You can't just have an email, you got to have an email. So you have to have a first name at least and an email, right, in order to put it manually into your autoresponder. So from that perspective, I'm building my lists. So list building is a very big part of this, because as you continue to working with clients, you may not sell a client today, but you'll have his email address. You may have talked to him, or in a lot of cases, you don't have to talk to him, particularly on Craigslist. And the autoresponder becomes very important because it's the way you reach out and begin to develop in that relationship. And then all of a sudden, he's paying attention. And we'll get into that in a lot more detail. As it relates to the client, you can help him build his list, because he's on Craigslist he's paying a little bit of money to try to get clients. What's interesting is they don't have any lead capture, most of them. And so you can create some lead capture services for them and create an autoresponder for them. And as they pay their bill every month, you're getting paid part of that as well, okay? Another area that I focus on that may not necessarily be your focus is bookkeeping and tax advisory services. Why is that a big deal? Well, I used to work for a tax law firm. I worked for a CPA firm in Atlanta, and he did bookkeeping and tax. And so I learned a lot about bookkeeping in doing that. For example, the reason I like the bookkeeping service is because it's a monthly payment. And so, you can work with a CPA firm or, an accountant that does bookkeeping, and they'll charge on a monthly basis, and you'll get a percentage of that. All right. Another big area, which is not a big area for me, but maybe a big area for many of you, is retirement, insurance, and investments. I've always said, and many people have heard in my groups, if you're an insurance agent, you are missing out huge if you're not using Craigslist. You're just missing out huge, because a lot of these guys maybe be onesies or twosies, but at the same time on Craigslist, you're going to see some firms that have 5, 6, 7, 10 employees. And so it is much easier. I used to be in the insurance business. Instead of sitting around, what you can still do, but instead of sitting around on kitchen tables talking to people about insurance and investments and retirement, which I did many years because I worked for Maryland, Citicorp, I did all of that stuff. And so instead of sitting around doing that, you can talk to a client and you can pick up the retirement plan. You can do some insurance for the business owner. And before you know it, you're doing insurance for the entire group. So now you're setting up group insurance, you got a payroll slot, all of those are great ways in. Another one that I don't have here is employee retention, the employee retention credit. And maybe we'll get into that in a segment, but that's important because you have to have a certain number of employees, typically about 5 employees, and there goes another income source. So if you look at the services that can be offered, and you may have some additionals, as we're talking about, you may be saying to yourself, wow, I could also do this. So this is just a simple list of services that I provide and some services that you can provide. And we'll go into some of these in detail on another segment. But this is just a great list of some of the services that business owners need. And hopefully it's beginning to click and you're beginning to see how important this really is and how it can work for you. So this ends the first segment, the overall introduction of Craigslist and how Craigslist works and what it can do for you. In the next segment, we're going to start talking about Craigslist and how you look at Craigslist and the things you need to be paying attention to as you start this journey of making money with the Craigslist Goldmine.